Well, on behalf of the Women's History Month Planning Committee and the HSC Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I would like to welcome everyone and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Meg and I'm an admin in the HSC OFDEI office. And just as a friendly reminder, we will be recording today's session and sharing it on the Celebrating Diversity website for those who are unable to attend today. And I just want to say it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today, Dr. Felina Ortiz and Martina Granada. Just as a quick background, Dr. Ortiz, who's DNP, a CNM, FACNM, and an RN, joined the University of New Mexico College of Nursing faculty in 2011 after practicing as a certified nurse midwife in clinical practice with underserved community for 8 years. Dr. Ortiz led the development and implementation of a prenatal group care facility facilitated by midwives and community health workers in a faculty practice based in a rural community health center. Currently, she teaches within the nurse midwifery and other advanced practice nurse practitioner programs and is a student success coordinator for the Clinical Masters of Science in Nursing students at UNM. Dr. Ortiz received her ADN, BSN, MSN, and DNMP. Wow, that's a lot of letters. Within 4 institutions in 2 different states, and throughout all of these programs, she never had the experience of learning from a faculty of color. With this in mind, she helped co-create the New Mexico chapter of Midwives of Color and is the current chair for the American College of Nurse Midwives of Color Committee. That works to recruit, support, and encourage midwives of color throughout the country. Her clinical scholarship focus includes awareness and improvement for maternal-child health disparities within communities of color, as well as recruitment and support for students and faculty of color. And really walking the walk, she has asked her former student, Martina Granada, to join today. And Martina was born and raised in Española, New Mexico, receiving her bachelor's at Northern New Mexico, and in 2017, graduated from our own UNM midwifery program. She has earned multiple degrees and is a certified nurse midwife, MSN, and registered nurse. Currently, she resides in Las Cruces, New Mexico, working at an FQHC clinic, La Clínica de Familia, and is an adjunct professor for both NMSU and UNM. Martina's work and interests are focused around marginalized communities and advising and inspiring undergraduates to build interest in health profession programs. And I want to say thank you both so much for joining us today. And just one more reminder again, we are going to be recording and we'll be sharing the link at the end so that you can share this great presentation with others. And I'll let you guys go ahead and take it away.
Buenas tardes. Gracias para invitar para hablar con ustedes este día. My name is Felina Ortiz, and thank you for that warm welcome and for the invitation to share one of my favorite topics that I talk and present on as a midwife. Midwifery is an ancient career tradition. It goes back to the biblical times. I became a midwife in 2003 because I wanted to help women. I felt like women that are healthier have more opportunity to grow healthier families. And when I was a student in our nurse midwifery program, and I remember the faculty talking about midwifery, and they mentioned that midwifery was a partera. I remember I was young and I didn't really understand that nurse midwifery was a lineage of the parteras. And I remember thinking in my mind, I'm going to be a partera, because parteras in my community when I was growing up was greatly respected and honored. And I have worked very hard as in my career as a midwife to continue and honor and support the tradition of partería. So thank you for being here today.
Good afternoon, I'm Martina Granado, and I am so honored to be presenting with Dr. Ortiz this afternoon on the roots of Partería, los raíces de Partería. I have to say that midwifery has been such a blessing in my life, and I know in many other people's lives in my family, and I'm hoping in my community as well. And I hope that this is the start of many fun presentations that Dr. Ortiz and I get to share together as we reach out and help encourage people and share this knowledge about midwifery.
These are the objectives that we're hoping to cover in our presentation today. Talk a little bit about curanderismo and about partería, how demonstrate their impact that they've had in our state, acknowledge some of the treatments that they used, highlight specific individuals that we have learned about or have came to know, recognize the benefits and challenges of working within the Department of Health, and then discuss on how we can continue to grow midwifery in New Mexico and why we should continue to grow midwifery.
So I'm going to present on this slide, and I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the early history of New Mexico and why parteras were so important. As you can see in this map on the left of the screen, it's, you know, a general map of the US territorial acquisitions, but you can see that New Mexico's shape has changed over the past centuries, and the map on the right of the state of New Mexico, you can see how different our landscape is with the mountains, and then we have a river and some deserts and things like that. But New Mexico covers 121,598 square miles, making it the 5th largest state in the whole US. Our history has gone through a lot of different changes, and some are not as, you know, pretty, but here we are today, and we've had to compromise and struggle and survive as a state, and we've grown. And I think one of the key things to remember is that parteras were a key player to the survival of any people. I looked up some information from the Rio Grande National Heritage Area organization that's in northern New Mexico, and they were sharing that in preparation for the Spanish conquistadores to come from Mexico to New Mexico, they prepared for 3 years. They got together like 200 soldiers with their wives, with their kids, everyone. It was a big group of people. And they came on horses, they had livestock, they had a bunch of things. One of the other things they had were, or other people who joined them were the Franciscan priests, several hundred Mexican Indian servants and allies, and thousands of heads of livestock. And they left for this journey in January of 1598. I wanted to mention this whole thing because I was talking to Felina, and I was remembering as a little girl, one of our cousins had a covered wagon that we went on a ride in. And one of the cousins said, "Could you imagine being in labor in this thing?" And now as an adult, I think about it and I'm like, that would have been horrible. And it makes me think of how important that the parteras were, because of our rural and isolated state as people. And even today, I've had patients that drive up to 2 hours just to get to a hospital where they can deliver. And so I think it's just a reminder that parteras are so needed because of our rural geographic parts of New Mexico.
Curanderismo is a diverse folk healing system that began in Latin America. It included Aztecan, Mayan, and Incan tribes that had a strong religious belief with harmony and nature. They also believed their gods punished sins with illness and disease, and in turn, some mortals were spiritually chosen and given the power to heal. And they healed by manipulating the supernatural and physical worlds. Curanderismo comes from the Spanish word curar, which means to heal, and a curandero is a male healer, and a curandera is a female healer. There are different types of curanderos. One example is a yerbera, is somebody that uses herbs to heal. A sobadora is someone that uses massage. A temescalera, which is a curandera that uses a temescal to heal. And in this slide, the picture on the right is a picture of a temescal. And we have healers that use temescals to heal in Albuquerque in our communities. Curanderismo is similar to other traditional medicines around the world, especially Chinese medicine, Native American medicine, and African medicine. Illness is often attributed to imbalances between hot and cold in the body, and curing is likewise accomplished by restoring the proper balance. For midwifery, pregnancy and delivery is considered a hot state, and postpartum is considered a cold state. And so we use foods that are considered hot to help heal the cold states, and foods that are considered cold to heal the hot states. Some cold foods include beans, corn, dairy, citrus, tropical fruits, and some hot foods include aromatic beverages and certain meats and wheat. It's the curandera-parteras that we're here to talk about today, and we're going to focus on. A partera is considered a healer that uses the supernatural and physical worlds to help with childbirth. Throughout the United States, midwifery was practiced in communities of colors from the beginning of our times within the United States. In the South, there were the Black grand midwives that cared for Black communities, and many provide obstetrical care and newborn care for white communities as well. There was the indigenous communities also practicing here in New Mexico. In the Pacific Northwest, there was many Japanese midwives practicing in the Japanese communities and so on. 100 years ago, the curandera-parteras were the primary maternal caregivers in northern New Mexico. There were documented over 800 to 900 curandera-parteras practicing. Most of them were working, like Martina has referred to, in the rural, isolated Hispanic villages of northern New Mexico. They were preferred by providers at that time, mostly because of cultural preference. Many of the parteras were female, and many of the Hispanic communities were very, very modest and preferred female providers. Other things that parteras had in common with their communities was their communication. They shared the same vocabulary, the same values, and the same social cultural backgrounds. This increased trust, and which improved patient state of minds during the childbirth and the labors. Also, the parteras were less expensive than physicians where there were physicians available, which was limited in our state. And parteras accepted bartering as payment, which is very common practice in the communities. In my research, I've heard stories about parteras accepting a bag of chile for their services to help with childbirth. In my research, I actually learned that my great-great-grandmother, who's pictured here in this slide at the right, the top, and the woman in the gray dress, was a partera. Her name was Dolores Telamante, and she practiced in Rio Arriba County, which is on the border of Colorado and New Mexico. Learning that my family roots included Partería has enhanced my desire to learn the history of the curandera-parteras in northern New Mexico. And I believe it's a history, their history, that has helped nurse midwifery be so highly regarded today. New Mexico has one of the highest percentages of midwifery attended births in the country. And because of the acknowledgement of their services and the partnership that the health department had with the curandera-parteras, I believe this has led to midwifery being embraced so welcomely even today. Oh, Martina.
Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. But I apologize, my picture isn't quite as pretty as Felina's, but I have this one here in my little office. It was given to me, but I love these ladies. They're parteras from northern New Mexico as well. And I would just like to talk about some of the traditions that the parteras had when getting ready for a birth. One important thing was preparing the room. Sometimes they had el tenedor with them. They used certain herbs, and they also believed in a 40-day convalescent period. So in preparing the room, going back to the whole belief of hot and cold, the parteras would seal the window sills and stop up the door drafts and things like that to prevent aire from getting into the room. It was believed that these drafts would enter the body and cause illness. They would use like a little flour paste mixed with like a little, I'm so sorry, a little cloth to seal the window sills. And as a side note, when I had my daughter, I had her in the same room that my grandma was born in 97 years before. And I went to the house to try and do all this preparing, and it was a lot of work. All those window sills are really cracked. And let's see, El Tenedor was a very interesting person. He would go with the midwives, but he was not necessarily a midwife himself, although there was documented of 2 male midwives. El Tenedor was actually a support person for the mom. He would put his arms around the laboring woman and kind of support her as he sat on a chair behind her, and sometimes would put his knee in the small of her back to kind of give her that extra support as she was pushing and laboring. They had also written about, they used to put a rope or a sash or something up around the viga so that women could pull down as well when they were doing that. Some of the herbs that they used were very interesting. The ones that I thought were most interesting were the use of osha and punche, which was placed on a clean cloth and then wrapped around the umbilical cord to help expel the placenta after the baby was born. They would also use a tea of malvas, which is mallow and raisins, to ease postpartum pain and also to help with the expulsion of the placenta. They had a very interesting technique for starting contractions. They would make a tea of hierba buena and coyaye, which is mint and snakeweed, and they would pour it over hot stones in a basin and have the patient sit on the basin, and the vapors would just go up onto the perineum. And I guess that would cause contractions. They also had other teas for after delivery. Some were cinnamon mixed with coffee, and tea for cramps was estefiate, hierba buena, and coyaye. So those were just some of the little remedios that they would use. As far as the 40-day convalescent period, the authors Marquez and Pacheco noted that some women would adhere to the 40 days and some were as short as 3. Mostly they found that reasons in the variation was due to like economic impact on the home. Some women have to get up and take care of other kids, things like that. But it was very important. They had a special diet that they would eat for the 40 days after that included a lot of these warm foods that Felina talked about earlier. And one was that atole that was supposed to help with breast milk production, because that's a warm food and kind of closing up the body afterwards. And another one was that I thought was neat, because New Mexico, we love our chili. Red chili was okay postpartum, but green chili was not. So if you're gonna eat any enchiladas after you have a baby, make sure they're red. But I thought those were very interesting. And of course, they also had mentioned that the meat any woman would eat in this 40-day period should be meat from a male animal. It was considered more pure. But I thought those were interesting to share. And then the next slide, Felina. So, and then this is my grandma. She's 103 now. And I apologize, my cinematographic capabilities are really lacking. So forgive any shuffling you hear in the background. It's me, I'm the camera person. Oops.
Which little town? Who had their own parteras?
Well, the community,
They had a different partera for el potrero?
no, they were parteras. And they were available, and no phones or anything, so they had to go and get them,
By the horse.
however. Pero digo, how do you like that? That they had, there was a unity in some way.
Yeah. You had to.
I just love my little grandma. She's so cute. And we were just talking and she decided to start talking about that. But what the nugget, the golden nugget there was at the end, that all these parteras and all these little communities help to create a sense of unity within all of the communities as a whole because of how important their role was. And I just thought that was golden. So I wanted to share it with you all.
Probably the most well-known curandera-partera that has been written about in several books, articles, is Jesucita Aragon. Although she passed away in 2005, her legacy is still alive here in New Mexico. Every time that I present about the curandera-parteras, often people stop me afterwards and say they either worked with Jesucita Aragon or was born by Jesucita Aragon, they were born with Jesucita's help. She had a 80-year midwifery career that started at age 13. She was apprenticed by her grandmother, Dolores Gallegos. Her tia, Valentina, was the curandera in the family who taught her the use of traditional healing herbs. She told me she had delivered more than 20,000 babies. Among them were 27 sets of twins and 2 sets of triplets. Most of the births took place in her home in Las Vegas, New Mexico. When I met Jesucita in 2003, she had stopped helping women deliver at that time. She stopped at 93 years old. But during the 4 hours that I spent with her talking, at least 3 people called while I was there asking her advice in what herbs to take for whatever problem they were having. She had shared with me that a patient that she had seen was having a hysterectomy that day because of large fibroids that Jesucita had diagnosed in her exam. As a young student midwife, I remember looking at my hands and wishing that my hands knew what her hands did, wishing my hands would learn how to see and feel as hers had. I was also aware that my hands probably would never get the opportunity to see and feel as much as Jesucita does because how we in healthcare rely on technology so much today. This next little clip I'm going to show comes from a video that I created in 2005. In 2005, that is this video, I don't know if you can see, it's called El Espíritu de las Parteras. That's not a very good video of it. I made this as part of a grant that I received from the Graduate Students Association here at UNM in 2003. I received the grant and I made the video and donated it to several libraries throughout the state, just for people that are interested in this topic, to give them a good starting of information and an opportunity for them to learn more about it. Since then, and now because of the technology we have, this video is available on YouTube. And like I said, it's called El Espíritu de las Parteras. I'm going to just share with you this video with Jesucita. San Ramon Nonado is the patron saint for midwives and pregnant women. Nonado means not born. Although his mother died in labor, Ramon miraculously survived and was born by cesarean birth. Therefore, he is prayed to, asking for protection of the unborn fetus. Curandera-parteras use prayer, statues of saints, other religious symbols, or spiritual beliefs to assist with their care. Invoking the saints' names, calling upon the Holy Trinity or the Blessed Virgin Mary, lighting candles, and making the sign of the cross are some of the religious actions of the healers. Some curandera-parteras put more trust and faith in these spiritual powers than in their own.
Yo le rezaba a San Ramón. Él es patrón de las partularias, y a San Luis Gonzaga. Sí. A muchos santos. La enferma está sanando y yo estoy rezando entre mí, porque mi abuelita se me enojó, porque yo no estaba casada. Y se enojó mi abuelita porque iba a tener a la Dolores. Y dijo, yo no te voy a asistir, dijo mi abuelita. Ay, quítatelas como puedas. Y le pide a Dios que si era mujer, le ponía María Dolores. Y hombre, no le pedí, no, pero le dije que me ayudara. Y sabes tú que no me dio más tiempo que hincarme en el suelo y nació la Dolores.
Doña Jesucita Aragon. I love hearing Jesucita's voice for sure, but I also like to hear those clips and get a sense to connect with the spirituality that the curandera-parteras had.
So what was a partera to her community? I had to show you guys another picture of my little grandma, and this is my mom, my sister-in-law, and all of my daughters, the little one in the middle, and my two nieces. And I just love this picture because it shows 4 generations of women, and it's all thanks to a beautiful midwife named Juanita in Chimayo, who delivered my grandma, made sure she was okay, and the rest of her brothers and sisters. She delivered 7 of them. And it's just, I just love it. And then on the right, the other picture is my great aunt, Soledad Mascarenas, who was a partera in Dixon, New Mexico. She was a very important person in the lives of my grandfather and his sisters and brother. When their mom passed away at a very young age, leaving 4 little kids, she stepped up and help take care of those kids. In fact, she would take the girls to deliveries with her. And they started in on this thing, and one of the girls became a nurse. And so I love that. So in the communities, according to my grandma, these parteras were so highly respected. When she says that she recalls when she was a little girl, if they saw the partera going anywhere, they knew that she was on her way to go help somebody. I found an article by Marquez and Pacheco that was talking about how the parteras really had to be very strong. And so here's a little part of a quote. The partera, that active woman, pioneer, working under a tremendous number of handicaps, provided an indispensable service to the Spanish American population. As my grandma mentioned in the clip, you know, somebody had to go on the horse to go find the partera. They had to leave their families. It could have been snowing, raining, or dry if we're really in New Mexico. But it's amazing that sometimes they didn't even know who they were going to go see, but they would go in the day or in the night. Midwives were very skillful, and they gained these skills sometimes from their own birth experiences, as Jesucita mentioned in the clip, also from assisting and apprenticing from other midwives. And at times they were just pressed into service. I like the way that those authors said pressed into service, because there was nobody else to help, and they just went and they did the best they could. And I think that these are the kind of qualities that the parteras had to have at that time, but a lot of them are also for the parteras even of today.
At the beginning, I said one of the things that set us apart from many states in our country with midwifery specifically was the relationship with the Department of Health. In 1921, the US Congress passed the Townsend Act. This law provided matching funds to states that had maternity, welfare, and child health programs. New Mexico used their Townsend funds to create the State Department of Public Welfare, a Bureau of Public Health, and a Bureau of Child Welfare. Then in 1935, the enactment of the United States Social Security Act gave New Mexico funds to expand and improve the programs for mothers and infants by creating a division of maternal child health, which was part of the Bureau of Public Health. One program that was created from those funds was the Midwifery Consultant Program. It was started in 1938. And it was started in the San Miguel County, but quickly spread throughout the state. And it was a collaboration between the Department of Health and the curandera-parteras. They provided classes for the curandera-parteras, and there was several benefits that both sides received. For the health department, the benefits included being able to provide more education to the state's main obstetrical providers. Also, the successful collaboration between the curandera-parteras and the government enhanced the confidence in the public health services for not only the curandera-parteras, but to their patients. There is this book, it's called, sorry. You can see. There's a book called Women's Tales from New Mexico WPA, La Diabla a Pie. And it was a program from President Roosevelt at the time that was collecting stories from several people in the communities. Some women went together and created this book, and all of these stories are specifically about women, and of course include stories about the parteras. But they called them La Diabla a Pie, which means the devil walking. It was because many people that collected the stories were from outside of the communities, and the communities called them the devil. And so that is just one example of the importance that trust was, especially back then and still continues today within government services. Let's see, also for the government, one of the services was that the curandera-parteras started to collect the vital statistics. So that gave the Department of Health better records because the curandera-parteras were providing the births, and many of the births, for having them collect the statistics allowed for us as the government, a Department of Health, to have better information of what's happening in our communities. The benefits for the curandera-parteras were that they received education that improved their midwifery skills. They also received essential supplies. And in this picture, you can see a curandera-partera holding a suitcase that the health department offered parteras that included, in this bottom picture, you can see all the different supplies that were given to them. And this suitcase in the bottom picture was actually taken by myself of a suitcase that we have here at the Health Science Library in our archives. So they received supplies. They also received an annual physical exam, and they became registered with the state, which increased their own credentials, and the classes allowed them to network with other curandera-parteras throughout the state. Elsie Sanchez was one of the parteras that I was able to meet in 2003. I learned a lot about her contribution to midwifery. She's a little bit different in the fact that she was a licensed practical nurse that worked for Bernalillo County and was asked to attend the classes as a translator. But when she started to translate for the parteras, she fell in love with midwifery and became a licensed midwife herself. She assisted over 1,000 women in home deliveries in Bernalillo, Valencia, Sandoval, and Torrance counties. And unfortunately, she passed away in 2008. She is a very special person for me because she actually grew up with my paternal grandfather. She knew him when they went to school together in just outside of Mora in northern New Mexico. This slide, I just wanted to capture parteras there's several articles that capture the work of the parteras. This one I wanted to include because one of our faculty members here in our midwifery program, Katie Kivligan, actually gave me the clipping on the left, and it is about Angelita Tapia, who was a partera in Taron. She was the partera who cared for Katie Kivligan's grandmother, Carlota Lavado, when she had gave birth to Katie's mother, who, like Martina has pointed out, this work includes generations and generations, and includes people that are here at the university today. In my research, when we were trying to get funding for our midwifery program here at UNM, the midwives that went to their state to get legislative funding was able to receive funding fairly easily because many of the legislators at the time were born by curandera-parteras. I'm going to show this 3-minute clip about Dona Remalda Moya, who was a partera that practiced in Valencia County. And this information is shared by her grandson. Dona Remalda was one curandera-partera that practiced in northern New Mexico. Dona Remalda delivered either at a woman's house or at her own, whichever the woman preferred. Although she passed away in 1964, her story was shared by her grandson, Fermin Lopez, and his wife, Angie Lopez of Los Lunas, both of which were delivered by Dona Remalda.
She was delivering babies. She delivered me. I think she must have been in her 20s. Yeah. She died, she was already in her 70s, and she was known. You mentioned Martina Moya or Marta Moya, everybody knew her. Oh yeah, and I have people here in this area. They were half of my school classmates were all delivered by my grandma. You know, see, a lot of people knew her. The timing that my grandmother had, it was perfect. That was like a almanac and everything. Get your heart out because I'm selling to the day. She put like a lot, you know, by a lot of things. She was always happy to see. Always people that I used to. She never. There was probably one or two that I know that the babies were born. I was like maybe 13, 14 years old. So my grandmother knew a state police that he was having kids like crazy. So, but he got me a chauffeur's license to take my grandmother to different houses. I was a chauffeur to take her because some people, they couldn't come for her, but and I put a pill on my back, to take her 50 Chevrolet, you know. I mean, I take her to these houses, and I used to drive, you know, maybe even 25, 30 miles all the way from Belen to Socorro. Well, from Paragos, because that's what she was from. At the women's houses, or the women come to her house, and they'd have the babies there. My grandmother used to have them babies for about 3 or 4 days. And she'd stay there with the lady. She had one that was the last bedroom. I wasn't even allowed there when they were children. I had to stay like by the door, you know, to get her towels, get her soap, get her brush. And like a servant, just remember to do it out of her, because she knew the people, and they were poor. She said, well, I got a chauffeur. And I have to sit over there, sleep in other people's home for 2 or 3 days, 4 or 5 days, something like. Yeah, because they would call her, or one time they sent a message, you know, my guy was coming to Albuquerque for her to go because she was gonna be delivered. And I remember sitting over there for about 3 weeks. We don't do this right. It was during the summer, so that was my summer.
Although we talked about that there was over 800 to 900 curandera-parteras registered in New Mexico in the early 1940s, between 1945 and 1965, 1945 and 1865, the number fell to less than 100. The nationwide movement to transfer births to hospitals played a large role in the decrease in the curandera-parteras, but most of the elimination came from the changes in New Mexico's midwifery laws. In 1944, New Mexico began to require certification, not just registration. In order to become certified, curandera-parteras had to pass a certification exam. Since most of the curandera-parteras could not speak English, let alone read it or sit for a written exam, most of them did not become certified. And in 1979, New Mexico promulgated new midwifery regulations stating that a midwife practicing without a certification was a jailable offense. As we examine the history of healthcare in the United States, there are many times structural racism affects communities of color. The history of the curandera-parteras is not exempt from this. These laws worked against the parteras without offering acceptable education in helping people from these communities continue their service to families and meet these new policies. I'd like to say there are parteras still practicing in our country, in many countries around the world, including including the United States. In the United States, our current laws make this illegal. However, many times they still provide a service to their communities that otherwise may not be obtainable. As we view health education and health policy with a more equitable lens, we find there has been documented structural racism within the profession of midwifery throughout our country. Midwifery has gone from a profession that was once predominantly inclusive of communities of color to a profession that is 86% white. One reason is that there are very few directors and faculty teaching in midwifery education. It is difficult to become what you can't see. When I practiced in Utah in 2004 to 2007, I was the only Hispanic midwife in the state. When I joined UNM's faculty in 2011, I saw the cultural diversity within our midwifery students as a treasure because I was aware of the impact these students could have on their communities. I've been a faculty member now for 10 years and have seen many of our students give back and improve healthcare in their communities. And one shining example is Martina here with me today. Martina is a midwife that serves in Las Cruces and has many patients that come and live on the border of the United States and Mexico. The work that she is doing in her career is exceptional, and her love and passion for this community is evident all throughout the state. UNM's midwifery program is nationally ranked and has an overall percentage of 30% of its graduates are of color. Currently, 50% of our current midwifery students identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. There's still a lot of work to be done to improve educational disparities.
That was, you're gonna make me cry, Felina. I wasn't gonna cry. So where do we go with Partería now? In New Mexico, it's very interesting. The Department of Health still oversees the certified nurse midwife, but they also oversee the certified professional midwife and the licensed midwives. I believe there's a few ways that we can increase our reach as midwives, whether we're a CPM, LM, or a CNM. And there's a couple of ways, that I was thinking about was an increased collaboration between the kinds of midwives that we are, whether it's a certified nurse midwife or the CPM or the LM, we can all learn from each other. And so I would always encourage any midwives or students, we can learn from each other no matter what. There seems to be some barriers that are felt sometimes in midwifery just because of the different ways that we all come to midwifery. But I think that with increased communication and working together, learning from each other, will soften those barriers and hopefully increase the opportunities for midwives to work well with the others and other collaborating partners. The other opportunities I think are if we have chances to work in birth centers, if it works with our families, with things like that, we learn a lot in the birth centers. And also increasing traditional practices even in the hospital setting, kind of the best of both worlds. I think that continuing to work on preserving the knowledge from what we've learned from previous parteras or previous people in the midwifery community are wonderful opportunities. I think that ways we can do this are kind of like Dr. Ortiz and I this morning, doing presentations, inviting people. I really enjoy when I have students who are like, oh, I thought about being a midwife, or I want to be in labor and delivery, and I feel like it's this opportunity to plant the seed. And I think those are wonderful. But I think one of the greatest opportunities we have as midwives is just with our patients. We're able to build a rapport and a relationship with our patients that sometimes will last generations, and they'll remember this little moment that they had with you, but it'll impact families for a long time. And so I think teaching about what a midwife is, what we're doing, and serving our communities are always wonderful ways to continue to grow midwifery, especially since we all come to, as midwives, different little avenues, whether it's starting off as a nurse or going on to apprentice with a midwife and going that route. We have a lot of variation, but a lot of great and wonderful opportunities to grow midwifery, grow families, and grow our communities.
In closing, I'd like to restate that I believe it was a partnership between the curandera-parteras and the State Health Department that created a vital relationship that affects the health status and confidence in midwifery that is still strong today. Hopefully, midwives that are practicing today honors those that come before them. And for me, this picture of Doña Jesucita blessing my hands symbolizes the continuation of the spirit of the curandera-parteras to a current midwife. Thank you for inviting us, Martina and I, to capture her story of the curandera-parteras. I hope that each of you remember your own cultural roots as you travel down the path of healing. And through our paths, we have learned, I am my grandmother and she is me. I am my mother and she is me. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Do we have some questions or people would like to ask?
Let me say a huge thank you so much for this presentation. Extremely informative. I love the use of videos, photos, and the historical account. Truly, it conveyed an important role of curanderismo in terms of delivering care for our diverse community. Dr. Ortiz, you mentioned that one of the limitations of maintaining our diverse pool of midwives was when midwives who maybe their primary language was Spanish, there was a barrier, there was a language barrier in terms of allowing them to pass exams. That is linguistic inequity. Can you talk a little bit more about how many of our midwives, considering that New Mexico, 28% of people who live in New Mexico speak Spanish, can you talk a little bit about what we're doing to increase the number of practitioners who maybe speak both languages and how we can support that in any way?
Well, I could tell you we need to do more. So even what we're doing is trying to do more outreach, trying to do more pathways for. One of the things I've been working on as the chair of the Midwives of Color through the national office is creating webinars that talk about midwifery for younger institutions or for younger students, because some of the research shows that having these kinds of experiences, kind of like Martina talked about with her, remembering being a child and being in the wagon and somebody talking about birth and making her think about that. But what the research shows is that the younger people that are exposed to careers and relate to it have more opportunity of growing into those careers. So one of the things we're doing is trying to expose more people to midwifery, starting with the younger groups, but at every stage in high school, in undergrad. I work with undergrad programs. I used to teach a maternal child health elective to help expose more undergrad students into midwifery, but also into the master's level or clinical nursing. So that's just one way. This is such an important thing, and there's so many other things that could be happening. Like, for example, another idea is, or something to think about, is helping to support the students that are in our programs that have English as a second language, to give them support and help them to network so that they don't feel alone, but on the same way, educate our faculty to be more cognizant and understanding, because we don't have the diversity within our faculty that we should have to support these kinds of changes that need to happen to better serve our communities. So there's just so many different facets to it, which I've learned in my time of being here. And I'm always appreciative to finding like-minded faculty and especially like-minded leaders in our institution.
Well, I want to thank I want to thank both Dr. Ortiz and certified nurse midwife Martina Granado. We are very appreciative for you all joining us for the Women's History Month Planning Committee, which has been supported by the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion of the Health Sciences Center and our partners across the campus. We want to be respectful that many of you we know are very busy in taking care of patients and community needs. At the same time, if Dr. Ortiz and Ms. Granado can stay on for a couple more minutes, is that possible, Dr. Ortiz? And we can continue to have Q&A. So, but I want to thank everyone for being able to join us for this first hour, and we'll continue with the Q&A. Thank you, Megan, for setting up the Zoom link. And as Meg has put in the chat box, please, everyone, remember to complete the post assessment so we can know how to further build our set of workshops for the Heritage Months. So any questions for Ms. Granado and Dr. Ortiz?
I don't have a question, but I wanted to just thank you both for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I'm Fabian Armijo. I direct the Office of Diversity for the hospital, and I also direct the language services team for the hospitals. And just yesterday, I was talking with some Spanish interpreters, and we were talking about how far away we've come from these natural remedios that we had it growing up at home, having a tea for a headache or different things like that. So I really enjoyed the part of these natural remedies that you brought up. And I love the history of Parteras in New Mexico. So yeah, just thank you both so much for that. It's nice to kind of think about that, right? A simpler time and different ways to heal ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Dr. Sanchez? Yeah. So hi, this is Doug Sedonis, EVP CEO. So I'm learning a lot about New Mexico in my first 3.5 months, and this was really a terrific presentation. And I feel blessed and honored to be here with you and hear what you shared. So in my role, I am very open and inspired by the wide range of healers and care providers that we have. So I know we won't have enough time to answer my question, but I'm hoping to learn more from you, and that if there are ways that I can be helpful in my role to some of the work that you outlined, I think that would be helpful to me. And I look forward to learning more. And the more specificity, the more it will help me on being practical. But this was really inspiring, and thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Dr. Sedonis.
Thank you. I want to say I'm so encouraged too, because several of my coworkers and my boss and the CMO of La Clinica were able to join us today. And I think that even these opportunities were so special. I get so excited when everyone gets to learn more about what I do and where we come from and things like that. And I think somebody had put in the chat box, and I really liked it, Semillas de Salud. And it's so true. I mean, we start at the very beginning, we just plant these little seeds. And I even had this really great conversation the other day, actually yesterday, with one of my patients. She said, "Oh, my son just loves you." And I was like, "Your son loves me?" And I was like, "Why?" And she said, "Because you said his name was so nice." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Well, what was his name?" And she said, "Oh, Jose Fabian." I said, "Oh, yes, that is a very nice name. It's very strong." It was just even that little seed for that little Jose Fabian, who has been so excited to go with his mom to see the Partera. And I think even these little opportunities are going to start to grow. And I'm very hopeful that as we continue to work and we just are learning And even with the Spanish language, I'm not perfect at it, but I always remind my patients que I'm doing the best I can, and si hago algo mal, you know, if I say the wrong thing, just tell me, because I've been known to screw up in Spanish for sure. So it's a lot of learning we do between each other, and I think collaborating with our patients, we're so blessed because I learn a lot from them as well.
Can I just share, Martina, to your point, you know, the culture and the policies that Dr. Ortiz mentioned, we were stripped of our language. You know, as a culture, American culture has prioritized one language. And in doing so, we've lost out in terms of maintaining Spanish and medical Spanish and health profession Spanish, but any other language, especially when you think about New Mexico and all the rich languages, but we could regain that. There's many medical schools and many other health profession programs that have launched Spanish tracks. And I think considering the diversity of New Mexico, we can retake our identity. And so I love the fact that what you shared, we're all learning and we could continue to learn. And I want to work with you on that because I think we could build the next generation to regain our identity, but it starts with us. So thank you.
Let's do it.
I do have to mention, Dr. Romero Leggett actually started a Canopy Spanish class just, I believe it was last semester or maybe 2 semesters ago, with this initiative in mind. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, Dr. Sanchez, because there's things are in place that our office, I'm really excited about the fact that our office is really kind of pushing for this. And Dr. Romero Leggett has taken, you know, amazing steps with the team to get medical Spanish out there and to try and help build those resources. So that's definitely something I think we can share with the community and really make sure everybody knows that that resource is there and that that's something that is definitely not only a need, but a passion and a want. And I do have to say on a personal note, your guys' presentation today, the connection that you made, all the stories that you shared, and the fact that you guys are the living embodiment of this, how important it is to have mentorships, relationships that continue beyond our education. It's something that is so exemplary. And thank you very much for doing that and for, you know, being incredible leadership to follow and to model ourselves after. So thank you so much for being here. It's really appreciated.
Since we're talking about the language, I just wanted to pop in and say as well, you know, I have to say I really give a lot of credit to the other midwives and physicians and people who really put the effort in to try and establish that language connection with patients. And I know a lot of midwives who don't know that much Spanish, but man, they try, and that effort in trying really is a grounding foundation for building the rapport that they have with their patients, and their patients just love them. So I definitely don't want to make it sound like, oh, you have to be exactly or know Spanish perfect. You know, I have a lot of friends who are not Hispanic or Latino or whatever we are, that are doing such great work because they're just putting in that effort. And I think that if we show up and we're doing our best, just like those parteras from back in the day who were pressed into service, if we're just pressed into service and we do it, you know, people know that our intention is good as well. And I think that we have a lot of building blocks that we're just gonna be able to build on as we go forth. Sorry.
This Dr. Ortiz and certified nurse midwife Granado, thank you so much. This is Val Romero Leggett, and oh my gosh, I mean, I don't care how long we've been here, that we're from here in generations, but I learned something new, and I just loved the history and your grandmas, and all of this is just so beautiful. And I don't know, but we have to save the chats for you too, because we really want you to see just how much you touched people today. And I think you're going to be getting lots of requests, because I think people we need to have this out there. We're going to certainly have it on the websites and on the nursing website as well. And I think there was also someone who was asking who they should reach out to if they're interested in a bilingual nurse midwifery right now. Who would be their point of contact?
Me.
Both of you? Yeah. So just to be sure, because it was in the chat there and asking, and again, this was amazing. And I was just, it didn't even seem like it was an hour. I'm just telling you, it just went by so fast. And I think Dr. Sanchez spoke to the, the video clips, and I loved Martina, how you said you were just talking to your grandma there, and all of a sudden she started talking about parteras, and then you're like, get that phone and let me, videotape her and capture that, right? Like how important it is to capture those moments. So heartfelt appreciation, mil gracias for everything, and for this just really amazing path in history, this journey that you've taken us on today. And the work that you're doing, my gosh, is wonderful. And we will definitely send our students that are in these programs, our pipeline programs and health professions programs interested in things, to you all, continue to send them to you all for midwifery. Thank you.
And one last thing, Dr. Mayor-Leggett, since you talked about the programs for students, yesterday I met with some team members from Dr. Mayor-Leggett's office, and we were talking about healthcare professions. And what we wanted to do is, me being the person that works at the hospital and DEI can be like an entry point for students to see people who look like them doing professions that are outside of doctor and nurse. So, one of those jobs is a medical interpreter, which a lot of times bilingual people want to become a doctor, be a nurse, and they're thinking, well, how, maybe they can't afford to do volunteer work to get patient contact. Being a medical interpreter is a way to get a pretty good pay and get that experience, and then as a stepping stone into other professions. But we talked about, doing these interviews so we could do them virtually because of COVID. So I think Felina or Martina, it'd be great to have one of you as interviewed on one of those, and we can show that to students. Like, hey, this is, you can be a nurse midwife, you can do this kind of work, right? And these are some people that look like you and that sound like you who have done it. So I think that would be inspirational to students. So I'm definitely going to reach out to you and see what we can organize to educate students on other professions out there.
Thank you.
Oh, and to Dr. Sanchez too, I love that you brought up the language piece, and just, historically for us here in New Mexico, we are very lucky and blessed that, the Mexican Americans early on succeeded in protecting the heritage by inserting some of the provisions in our Constitution to make Spanish an official language. So for us here in New Mexico, which we know is very, very unique. So we're very proud of that as well.
Hi, this is Laura from the library. Hey, I have a question for you guys. As you're talking about language, what do you think about the need for different information resources that then support that idea? So, I mean, we really focus on English. And so I'm just sort of asking the question, what does that look like?
I'm not sure in the library sense, but I know that I have a book thing, and in my garage I have like 2 bookshelves of books that I found that are like Spanish, colonial Spanish, translated into English. Even having different resources like that available to students might even be a little bit of a help. I have things about the traditions and things like that. I need to go through all my stuff to make sure I know what I got, but I love those resources because I'll have somebody say words, or I'll say words and they're like, no, that's wrong, but it's not so wrong in New Mexico because that's how we are and that's how we learn Spanish and things like that. So I think that having even those resources that are available to students is always fun and educational and helpful too.
Okay. Is it mostly interpretive, like more of a Spanish-English dictionary? Or is it a little more
it's all based on Southern Colorado, Northern New Mexico Spanish. I could run into the garage and go find it.
No, no, you're fine.
But I
We
love
can
that
email
one
later.
just because.
I'm wanting to be
Just
sensitive.
because
to- Go ahead. Sorry.
I just like having those resources, and I think anything that helps students to see the differences and things like that are always helpful.
Mhm.
I also think it could be important for faculty members, especially faculty members that are trying to learn Spanish or at least learn the culture. I know I'm the student success coordinator for the College of Nursing for the master's level, one of them, one of two. And some of the experiences that I've had in the last 2 years of being a student success coordinator is having the faculty not able to understand, sometimes because of language, but sometimes because of culture for the
Right.
students. And for one example is we were doing an OSCE or an evaluation, and it had to do with cancer. And it was the students were evaluating the patient, and the right diagnosis was that it could possibly be cancer. But we had one Spanish student, or it actually wasn't a Spanish student, it was a student from New Mexico, but indigenous, and did not want to say cancer because of the fear of that could cause to the patient. There's a cultural thing. And so
Right. Absolutely.
things that, those kinds of resources that you're talking about, Laura, in our library could be very useful, not only for language, but culture for our faculty.
Mhm. I think we would need some guidance and partnership. So I guess I'm just opening the door a little bit to figure out what does that look like and how could we be more supportive of that.
I think another resource or another topic that I really found very interesting as far as understanding better different patient populations and even students as well is this concept of the high and low context cultures. Whereas in the Spanish culture, we have a very high context culture. You can tell I talk with my hands. I'm very like, ah. Then I start crying if someone says something really nice. You know, we're very high context, and I think even understanding that sometimes is so, it makes like a light click on, and it's just amazing. So I've learned that that's been very helpful for me to put into words, like what things that I see even in my own culture, like when my family gets together, why are we so, you know, loud and talking all the time or whatever, but that's just a way how we work it out.
And I'm the opposite. I mean, my family's very quiet, but I've learned in my doing national work, there's so many people wanting the same thing, but going about it in different ways. I have to step up I find that I have to step up my game in vocalizing, and that's very different. Vocalizing what I'm thinking and what I want from the conference or the conversation, and that's very different than the way I was raised. And so, but all of it is important, and it all makes a difference when we can come together.
Well, I want to thank again both of you for again a historical, beautiful journey for all of us, and the work that you do. And I'd also like to thank the planning committee, many people on that committee, but of course Meg, who did our introductions today, and Stephen Romero, and our co-chairs Melissa Reflison from the library, Hislick, and Jessica Holland, and Dr. Sanchez, and Dr. Gomez Chavez, and I'm sure I'm forgetting others because many joined this month in the Women's History Month, Dr. Pata and many, many others, but to thank them for putting together this extraordinary series this month. I mean, this one, oh my gosh, you just had so many people, and this has just been wonderful. And we will have this, just to remind everyone again, this is going to be posted. This will be on the websites, on our office. I think College of Nursing wanted this as well. They'll have it there. And anyone, you know, who else would like this link, we would love to have this out there. But I'm sorry, I'm gonna need to leave right now, but I just, again, wanted to offer my sincere appreciation to both of you, but all of you for joining today too.